Alrighty, I might get into it. So hopefully I'll get in and out pretty quick. We can go home and have a bit of time for questions at the end.
Did you start the broadcast?
I did hit start broadcast. It was freaking me out because there's a whole screenshot of that screen. I'm moving the mouse, wondering why I can't get out of the window. The mouse is up here and I'm watching it over here. Yeah, so that's going now. So I'm going to talk about a bit of a challenge I've had quite a few years ago in my career, and one of the solutions we worked with the team to put forward for it. And so being able to get better performance out of Sitecore solutions. And it's not applicable for everyone. It's only really applicable for certain cases, and there might be better solutions out there, but this is what we did. So I thought I'd have a chat about that. And I apologize for the clickbait. I'm clearly not marketing, but had a crack. Yeah, I've got a couple of AKQA slides. So we're AKQA, that's where I'm from. And we have quite a few people around the world. We're part of WPP, they're our owners. We're part of a big group of companies within WPP. But AKQA has quite a few offices, and I'm from the ANZ part of that practice, or Asia Pacific. And in this region, we have, our technical team has a pretty big focus on Sitecore. It's one of our biggest capabilities. A bit of Adobe, some other stuff as well, but we'll talk a bit more about Sitecore. And we have pretty lucky to be within the WPP group, so we have an alliance with Sitecore globally, which is good. So we're a global platinum partner. That gives us a bit of inside access to a lot of stuff, which is really nice to have. We're sitting on the Partner Advisory Council, and in particular, we have a big commerce practice, and I'll be talking about some commerce use cases today. So we've been getting some good early release work on the Sitecore commerce work that's come out. If you want to know what's broken in it, come and chat to us. There's quite a bit. There's a few tired people around because we've been fixing some Sitecore commerce stuff that's rolling out at the moment. But yeah, we've big decent team sitting with a pretty close alliance with Sitecore. So that's what we've been doing. And for myself, I'm currently the Exec Technology Director of AKQA. I oversee the Australia and New Zealand offices. So get to come to work with quite a few people in this room every day. It's probably really good. I like working with some pretty talented colleagues. Luckily, I've been awarded Sitecore MVP 4 times. And this is always my happy picture of being over in Vegas this year. So a bunch of our AKQA colleagues from globally, who are the other MVPs who got to go to the summit this year. If you're ever thinking about coming and presenting a user group, putting some blog posts up, applying to be an MVP, do it. It's worth it just for the business case for a party. Like, it's a good week, and you get over to go to Sitecore Symposium, hang out with the product team, and chat to them about what they're doing. So they've got a pretty good roadmap. So it's always good to get the inside gossip straight from them on what's going on. Also a bit of a volleyball fanatic, and my daughter's going to hate me for it one day, but she's definitely going to play volleyball. Apart from that, I think in my professional career, I've been sort of by chance just happened to work with a lot of retail clients. So started out very early doing a bunch of work for Myer, worked for Kmart, Coles, Bunnings, Officeworks, quite a lot of the bigger tier 1 retailers in Australia, and there's some challenges that come with that. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. There's a challenge, and this is one that we worked on a few years ago with quite a few of the clients I had at AKQA. Retail. If you've worked with many retail clients, there's one thing you'll know is that traditionally see really bursty traffic. That's true in digital. It's also true in stores. So think about clients like people like Myer or any of those retailers. They have a lot of sales or specials-driven promotions where they work on a high-low basis, right? They'll try and get high volume on the discounted promotional products, drive volume in there, and then try and make some money on the high margin stuff. You got other retailers, and globally you look at well, within Australia, you look at, say, Bunnings, everyday lowest price type guarantee, and that's where they're just going out with that low base rate, that low margin but low price every day. They're two classic approaches in retail. And what you see beyond the in-store sense, Boxing Day sales versus the rest of the year, you see this online. So our retail clients, even ones who aren't doing promotional sales on Boxing Day and things, will still see 20-30% traffic peaks. And you'll get that just on a day. Or there'll be Black Friday now becomes a really big thing as well. Even though it's not an Australian thing, you still get massive spikes on these clients. So it's hard to deal with when you're just out of nowhere. We had another one. We had a UK client put a couch on sale for 1p. wasn't entirely on purpose, but they reduced a 2,000-pound couch down to 1p, and you see the traffic spikes out of that. So it's still the biggest traffic day they've ever had. They actually took their site offline by doing that and lost a lot of money. It wasn't deliberate, but you get big bursts. So particularly, you put something on special, it goes viral. That's what happened in that case. It went extremely viral, and your sites will go offline. So capacity planning is really difficult. That's a tough challenge. For a bit of an idea, so a lot of the top 10 Australian retailers, and you might have access to some statistics on them. People like Hitwise publish these stats. But on a busy day, they'll be seeing something like 1 out of every Australians will visit their site. So you think about that type of penetration in the public. It's a lot of traffic, and it keeps growing. So a couple of people I've worked with, we're getting 50% sustained year-on-year growth. So on top of all of that, you end up with a lot of weird geographic rules. So every state has different pricing. Every store has different pricing. A lot of this makes it very difficult to serve a customer quickly and with accurate information. And if you work at retail, speed matters. I mean, you've probably seen the Amazon studies where they deliberately A/B tested adding 100 milliseconds to a page response time and saw multiple percentage points drop in conversion just by that. It makes a big difference to your bottom line. So it can be millions of dollars by not being quick. Anyway, that's my setup. So some typical solutions to what you do with this type of scenario, and this is nothing Sitecore specific. So typical stuff: throw more hardware at it. It's easy. As an architect, I like it. I just go buy some more stuff. So add some more database nodes. You can keep scaling your database horizontally until it can serve the traffic. Add in Sitecore instance, add content delivery servers. Go and add some more memory, CPU, scale everything you can. And in cloud infrastructure, that's relatively easy. But you end up paying, particularly in a Sitecore solution, that starts to get really costly. So you start to talk to a client about the 10th, 11th, 12th delivery server. They start to go, hang on, this is costing us a lot of money. Maybe we can do something a bit smarter. So get past that, start to look at your caching. So cache the world. And every solution we have, you've got database caching, all of your external services you cache. So heavy application caching. Sitecore component caching, go through, review all that, make sure it's working. You start to offload images off to cloud storage or some solution like that, take that traffic away. Make sure you're using effective browser caching. High volumes, that's still not enough. So it becomes challenging. And you start to get very careful about how you manage your cache. So you'll find very quickly in a Sitecore world that you hit publish and it will automatically clear your HTML cache. And you'll see your servers die, essentially. Or another lovely one of Sitecore Commerce features we've found recently is try and run a bulk import on Sitecore Commerce, say 100,000 products, and every product it imports, it will drop your entire ASP.NET cache. Just tip, if you do a Sitecore Commerce site, go get a patch for it, because it took a couple of our sites offline recently. You've got to manage that caching really closely if you're relying on that to hit that traffic. So it only gets you so far as well. Probably going back a bit now, but pre-cloud days, Azure and things, before that actually existed in Australia, one of our clients actually got on, when they launched a new site, they got onto the homepage of The Age, and that sent enough traffic their way to saturate the internet link. So they couldn't serve any more traffic. The actual hardware was fine, but they couldn't service the traffic through the internet link going into the data center. So high volume gets very difficult and tough to deal with. So again, to put on my architect hat and I think pretty hard about what do I do about all these crazy people trying to flood my infrastructure. What am I going to do about that? Think long and hard, do some deep thinking, and put in some magic clouds. So this is where I bring that in, and this is my solution to everything. It's CDN is your typical solution to offloading that type of traffic. It has a lot of other benefits, but traffic offload is one of the main ones. It also ensures really fast delivery across geographic regions. So if you put a CDN in place, you can service traffic out globally out of a single data center in a lot of cases. So we've had some clients serving out of Azure Melbourne, servicing a big cohort of users over in the UK, and had really good response times for them just because of the CDN usage. Who knows what a CDN is? Anyone? Hands up. Give us a Jose. What's your take on the CDN? What's your elevator pitch? What is it?
It stands for Content Delivery Network, and it's just like a centralized place for libraries or JavaScript files or
Yep. Yeah.
why it's not.
That's one use case. That's a really classic one you come across. Like Google has a CDN that hosts all of the, like jQuery and all those files that you can link to and use. If you shove one in front of your site, rather than hosting static assets like that, it'll actually act as a proxy to your own origin servers. So it'll cache the output going through. So typical CDN, and there's players like Akamai, CloudFront, Cloudflare, Fastly is another one. There's a ton of them out there. Amazon's, I think it's just called Azure. I think it's just Azure CDN. I'm not sure what they call it. They've all got an offer. The typical thing is tons of servers distributed globally right near where the traffic is, and they cache the output that you give them. So they'll store the HTML page or the assets that you're serving out, so they can serve them locally without having to talk back to your original server. So networks like Akamai, for instance, actually they have tons of these edge servers. So in Australia, Akamai has a delivery server, so one of these, edge node, pretty much sitting inside every Telstra data point going around the country. So if you're talking to Telstra, basically that first hop you make sitting inside that data center next to the Telstra endpoint is a Akamai edge node. So you have almost no latency going to it. So really quick for global distribution of assets and different stuff. So effectively, you can think about them as though they're a key value store. So here's a URL. Do I have something stored in my cache for this URL? No, go fetch it and store it. Or if I do, just return that object. It could be HTML, it could be an image, it could be CSS, JavaScript. That makes some sense. And this is kind of how a typical CDN setup works. So crazy customers flooding your site with traffic, they make a request, so GET request to the homepage, and the CDN will look at that and go, that URL is my key. I'll go look in my cache to see if I have a value stored for that key, and if I don't, I'll go back to the origin and request it. So you'll see that hit come through. But if they do, they'll just grab that markup or whatever it is you've stored, shove it straight back out, job done. You never see that at the origin. So that's fantastic. And put this in place for customers, and you'll probably be able to achieve something like 95% offload of what you see back to origin, which is fantastic and really, really cheap. So you're not sitting on a pure Sitecore solution, really easy to do. But you do have some issues with that. So if you have a Sitecore solution, we've got plenty, because there are a couple of slightly older ones which are doing adaptive renderings, or you have some sort of geographic rules around how you deliver pricing to customers, or you're using personalization or A/B testing or anything like that. What actually gets returned to that homepage is not the same object every single time. So a stat for a client, if you've got a couple of devices, maybe 15 different sort of regions that you do pricing in, 10 segments that 10 profiles that you're personalizing against, that's 300 different possible things that could be returned for that. So that key value doesn't work. So typical Sitecore solution, you want to use personalization, you want to use A/B testing, you want to use all of that, and you can't, because you can't use a CDN at the front of your site. So you can't get that benefit of the offload and the reduced latency of the clients. So again, this isn't a solution for everyone, but you start to hit really high traffic volumes, and this is one of the tools you have. So what we did, and this is a few years ago, but it's a few different ways of solving this problem. They've all got pros and cons. This is just one thing we did, and it works for us. Again, the cons are worthwhile for the pros we're getting. We took a look, and effectively a request coming in, so that GET request coming in isn't just a URL. So it's actually got a whole bunch of other information in it. We know the user agent, cookies, the referrer, a ton of stuff. And better modern CDNs, not every single one, but most of the CDNs out there can use more than just the URL as the key. And that's kind of it. So what you can do is actually create a composite key and look at the request and start to use that to figure out what can be returned. That's part of what you need to do for this solution. So you can create a composite CDN key. In our case, we've got adaptive rendering, so we need to know what the device is. We have some regional pricing, so and tons of clients do this, state-based pricing, a whole bunch of stuff. So we need to know where they are so that we can return the right price. You find out pretty quick. Commerce retail clients pretty sensitive about getting the right price back. Pretty quick phone call when they don't. And you need to have some idea. For us, we want to personalize. So we put a cookie out there that's got a segment in it. We'll be able to target those segments that we want to do. So you can configure the key that the URL looks at to actually interrogate the cookies coming in. And based on that, so that client I'm talking about before, it's got 300 variations of the homepage. Those variations are encoded in these cookies. So they can look at that, combine the cookies, use that as the key, and bang, they've got the right variation. So the way I think about that is if you jump in the experience editor in post 8 and they start to actually, there's the display where they actually show you all the variations of a page with the A/B test and personalization rules you've got. You need to have every single one of those stored in the CDN if you want to make use of the CDN. So effectively, you can do that if you start to use a composite key. A side effect of this, though, as I was saying before, great. We do this, we get massive offload, don't see heaps of traffic here. That's fantastic. Sitecore's personalization, so the way it actually starts to look at its pattern cards to identify what pattern card people match relies on it recording what pages they've looked at. And if we return everything straight from the origin, they never see that. It never comes back. We actually don't know how to personalize for them because we've never seen them on the site. So the downside is you never see any side effects of actually running any code on this server. You just basically pump back straight HTML. So you need to do something about that. And so what we've put in place, and it's actually easier. We did this about Sitecore 6.4 originally, port 6.5, port 7.2. Now on 8.2, keep upgrading that solution. We've done it on a couple other solutions in the past as well on slightly older versions, but much easier now if you go 8.2 and 9 because FXM has actually pulled a bit, it's made it simpler. What we've got is basically putting in an AJAX endpoint which they can call back for the page. So retrieve the page, basically dump straight from here. So in milliseconds, you've returned that page straight from CDN. Customers got it, it's great. And then just push a AJAX request through to do just the tracking, just run the tracking pipeline. And with that, you've got the tracking occurring back on Origin. Do see some traffic come into Origin, but this is really low load. That's good. And we don't have to run on every page, which is also good, but we get low load on that pass through, and this is returned to the customer super fast across a bunch of regions, and it's accurate, and we don't see any heavy traffic for having to generate pages. So that's really good. So if you put all that together, and shout out if I'm going too fast or have any questions, because I don't have that much content, so typically we'll just leave it. Put all that together, we need to be able to get our CDN to use some composite keys. To drive this, we need to be able to set some cookies on the server that we're interested in. And things that we've done has been to set cookies looking at the active device, personalization segments the user belongs to, other stuff, so regions, for pricing regions or any other information you care about. This is the pro and con of this solution. So the con is you can't just run any single Sitecore conditional rendering rule. It needs to be something that's been dropped out that the CDN knows about. Add an AJAX callback to run that Sitecore tracking pipeline, and then a few other pieces. You need to tell the CDN how long the cache content for and a few bits and pieces. Nicety, let your content editors actually play around with this and adjust it. So I'll show you a little bit of how we put this together. Configuring a CDN. So this is a Cloudflare example. We've done the same thing in AKQA as well. AKQA is a lot more expensive. If you've used it, it's probably an order of magnitude more expensive than Cloudflare is. And you have to ask their support team to do this for you because they don't really give you tools. But Cloudflare, you can just go do it. But this is an example where the key that they use is actually, this is the, doesn't have a client in it, it's good, got them all. The key in here for the caching rules that they have is, one of them is that we'll respect all of the cache headers that are set on the content being returned from the origin, and the CDN will use that to control the cache. We also set this key, so it's made up of the scheme, the host, the URI. That there is the typical key that any CDN out of the box will be using. And customization we've got is to tell it to go look at a bunch of cookies, to also use those to make up a key. So we can get many more variations for the one URL. Yeah, most of the bigger CDNs will do this. AKQA do it. Yeah, a couple others as well, and Fastly do it. Amazon, I believe, does it. It's a bit hard to figure out where it's documented. I haven't tried it in there, but they do it. Azure don't. Fastly do, yeah, a couple others do. We've given our content editors a little bit of control in this, so we have a cache caching template. We can choose to bypass the cache for certain pages and to adjust the cache duration. And that's just the template that all of our pages inherit from. So on the standard values, we just set it as default, so that's an hour to cache. But on certain pages, so if you're a commerce client, your checkout definitely doesn't want to be cached in the CDN. Definitely needs to go to Origin. The user profile, definitely want to get your profile page, not someone else's cached one. Something to be aware of is doing that. So you go make sure you tick the box, and probably take the permissions away from your content editors to do that themselves. Otherwise, they'll break it at some point. You'll get a phone call. But yeah, so you can control this on a per page, per template basis to change these settings. So a typical activity for us might be that when we know there's high traffic days coming, we might go and increase our cache duration just to go, cool, because most commerce clients don't make a ton of product updates on a massive sales day. They'll publish it out, and that day they're kind of in lockdown. So we'll go increase our cache duration for people and go put it up to 6 hours or something. So we just decrease that traffic coming through. You got a few little levers to play with. In general state, you can drop it down. Even 5 to 10 minutes makes a massive impact to the amount of traffic you see through. So it doesn't have to be that high. And the rest of it, I've got a little bit of code. So hopefully you guys don't make too much fun of me. I don't do so much coding now, but I do have it. All right. This is just some of the pieces of the solution we've put together, and this is awkward turning around, isn't it? So one of the first parts we need to do is set our cache headers. And everyone can see this, so hopefully it's blown up big enough. I can increase if we need. One of the first things we need to do is set the cache headers that go out to the CDN. So when we're returning a page, the thing that will tell the CDN whether or not it should store it and whether or not how long it should store it for, typically, and different CDNs are different in how they do this, but something in your response headers will control that cache. So in this case, the way we've done that is to drop a component into the render layout pipeline. So we jump in there, and we can then from there drop out some new cache headers. So this is just going through and calling set update headers, which bang ends up calling a extension method over here. I'll show you the core of it. There's a bunch of setup, but the core of this for Cloudflare specifically is to set the proxy max age. So I don't know if you guys have deep dived into the cache control header. There's the typical max age pieces of it. There's also smax age, which stands for shared cache, and that's a proxy. And in this case, that shared cache is Cloudflare. They respect that header. So we'll go out, we'll drop a bunch of updates in, set up the cacheability, but the key for this is if this item is marked as cacheable in the CDN, we'll tell it to cache for a certain time span, and that's that set proxy max age. If you're using AKQA, we did have this solution using AKQA. It doesn't use the cache control header. They've got some custom headers that are AKQA specific, but it's the same logic. You basically go cache this page for this amount of time. Or don't cache it, bypass, send it straight through to the customer. Does that make some sense? The other components is setting the cookies and also running the tracking pipeline. So the AJAX callback, this is we're just dropping a sublayer on the page, which just runs an analytics method, and all that does is invoke an AJAX callback. There's some logic in here on whether or not we should run that callback on pages. So we don't have this on every page. We want to shed as much load as possible. So not every single page will run this with personalization running. We're a bit selective just to help reduce the load. And if the page has gone straight from Origin, we don't run the callback for something that's done that as well. But the actual callback ends up being pretty straightforward. And we worked for weeks figuring this out. And it ended up being basically a couple of lines. And the same couple of lines has been ported across a couple of major versions of Sitecore. That's the crux of it. And so just start the tracking pipeline. And that just kicks off Sitecore's tracking. everything it would run, it runs. The little bit of setup we do before is we look at the URL referrer to that AJAX request, which is the page making the request, and we load that item, and we set that as the current context item. So that's right here. So we look at the referrer URL, that's the page we want to run the tracking pipeline for. We load that as the current context item. This is just a Sitecore call to run the tracking pipeline. That does it. Final part is, in this callback, we have some logic to return a cookie for the segment. So pretty straightforward. We go interrogate all of the active Sitecore pattern cards for the current user, and we'll join them together into a string, and we'll check if that's changed based on the cookie that came in with the request. If they've got new patterns, if they have, we'll update the cookie they've got. But this is just checking if there's been any change to the active segments that they're in. Based on that, we're setting a cookie in the client's browser that they'll start returning on all following requests, which the CDN can look at and can then return the right page for them. Make sense? Cool.
What was the logic about A/B testing or sort of profiling that you do in page editors?
This does all the profiling. It doesn't take care of A/B testing.
Yeah, it does do the profiling.
I had code in the past that was doing that. Yeah, it does the profiling. So this code here goes and finds the active pattern cards that a user matches. So in Sitecore, when you set up all the different pattern cards, it will go and find all, and it's a really quick lookup. It's stored in the session. It'll grab the active pattern cards. So if you're a premium, if you're a premium level purchaser, or if you're a discount level purchaser, we'll often be personalizing against, if you're going after the high end or low end products, and that'll be a pattern card. So we'll know you like high end or low end. We had some liquor clients who were profiling what wine varieties that they liked, returning that, and so we were able. They're the pattern cards we were matching, and that was in that segment cookie coming back, so that when they next made a request with that cookie set, we didn't need to go back to Origin. We'd go straight from CDN.
You don't actually need to have Sitecore render the page to get all this.
You do originally. You do once. Yeah. So if a request comes in and I've got a pattern card that is discount Dora or premium poly, maybe that's my two patterns. From memory, that's what I used to use. I don't work with them anymore, but that's what they used to have, like premium poly, discount Dora. If I'm a premium purchaser or a discount, that's what we're trying to track. So based on the pages they're looking at, am I looking at the high-end products or low-end? We'll profile you against that, and we'll have a match on one of those pattern cards. When this callback runs, this will go, you match this pattern card. You've triggered it, so your discount Dora, that comes back into the segment cookie. The next request I make will go to the CDN or go to the home page. It'll be discount Dora, will be the segment. If the home page and discount Dora as a key doesn't exist in the CDN, that'll go straight through to Sitecore. We'll render that page and have all the discount promotions and all that personalization on it and return it back. The second time someone goes and does it, that's just been stored in the cache, so it doesn't go back to Origin. So yeah, you get offloads. It's not perfect, right? So the trade-off is, again, when you're doing this, it's only what you've managed to push out to cookies can be taken into account, or any other aspect of the request that a user makes. So you can't track any random conditional rendering rule inside Sitecore. So your content editors can't just go and start doing on first visit, second visit, third visit, fourth visit, unless you got a cookie that has that information in it and the CDN knows about it. So it's really good for being able to massively scale these scenarios. But you need to look at the scenarios that you're going to support, see if it works. I say you wouldn't do this unless you got big traffic volumes to deal with. You do lose the flexibility. The other part we do is pump out the cookie for a device for cookie. So we've overridden the out-of-the-box device resolver, and we essentially all this is doing is at the end of the day setting a cookie to say the name of the device. So an adaptive rendering side, if you're on mobile, or if you're using the mobile rendering, if you're using the desktop rendering, we have a lot of our solutions will set up a special rendering if it's being invoked in an iframe context. Remove the header and footer, but keep the page, stuff like that. So it'll figure out what we're doing and make sure that cookie's been set. That's pretty much the solution. So, when we first put this together years ago, it took a long time, and it ended up being very, very little actual encode to support it. it works pretty well. So if I go back, I'm on this screen now. My mouse is over there. There are a couple other things that I haven't covered. That gets your pages returned, but if you look at the typical page, what I haven't talked about, generally a page, classic, you have a bunch of user-specific stuff rendered on that page as part of the response. So account, if I've signed in, that's probably going to turn in my username and have a sign-out link. If I'm not signed in, that'll be login and blah, blah, blah. My card, maybe a dollar value of what's in there. Bunch of other stuff might actually be specific to that user, and these are global elements, so they break all of your caching. Like it really breaks that CDN cache. So there's other stuff you need to do about that. And the solution we've got is dynamically load these elements in. So the base page in the CDN doesn't have any of that information in it, unless you forget about it, put it in, and then we have a bug, which has happened. So base page return has none of this user-specific info in it, and we have an AJAX request, a single one that goes back, and it will render, Sitecore will render that AJAX request, loads up a sub layout, just renders that sub layout, spits it back out, and then we store that in the browser's local storage. So essentially once per session, we'll go load some of those, unless the value changes, and we'll reload them. I don't want to go into all the details of that solution. That's a bit of a homework if anyone ever wants to try it, but it's pretty effective, and basically means that base page is globally cacheable, and yeah, gets really fast response times. Some of this uses specific stuff. Other examples, often pizza clients want to have something on the site saying where your nearest store is, detect that, so that has to be dynamically loaded as well. And finish up, did it work? We've got pretty good outcomes. So this is a 24-hour period for one client, and they saved about 1.2 terabytes of bandwidth, which is pretty good. 87% of the bandwidth, so that's a ton of bandwidth offload. This is from Cloudflare, something, it's not quite as good in Akamai, but in Cloudflare, the more bandwidth you use, the cheaper your plans generally get. Like they're pretty open that the more bandwidth is consumed, the cheaper the bandwidth cost is for them. So the peering arrangements they have, they carry so much traffic on the internet for Cloudflare that they want more traffic. They carry so much of it, but basically people are paying to get access to it, not the other way around. So it's great. The more you can offload heaps with it. Akamai, the opposite. So why they're like an order of magnitude more expensive is they'll bill you like a mobile phone provider overseas. Every megabyte's $50. That's crazy. So Akamai is pretty expensive when you do high volumes on offload, but still cheaper than that going through to your data center or cloud provider. And yeah, we've got something like 75% offload going. Not everything has personalization on here, so that helps get that number right up, but about 75% offload for page requests going in the Sitecore. We just don't see that much of it. So basically means we can reduce our server count quite substantially and get much faster page delivery, because the CDN edge nodes are sitting right next to our customers' ISPs, and they're just pushing that content straight out. Cool. So that's me. Questions? Thanks, Ashley.
Awesome.
Yeah, that'll go.
Yeah, I think anyone working on like high traffic website before, I used to work on the desktop website earlier in my cycle career in Australia, and I had the same issue.
Yeah.
And with that particular instant, we only do donut caching. So we actually have to leave all the page actual SPH request through. But we only cache the missing pieces like that, images and all the rest.
Yep.
So
yeah, and that's a typical response, and that helps a lot. Like it helps a lot. And we don't do this for that many. We haven't needed to do it for many. A couple of retail clients that we put this type of solution in for, because they get big bursts. The downsides can be a bit annoying. So and tons of our clients, typical rollout is it's two delivery servers, and that's way more than they need. It's just so that they don't go offline if one fails. So, but yeah, when you start to ramp it out, those cycle licenses get expensive, and something like this, I think think they're paying, that traffic offload, a couple of 1.2 terabytes in a day as an offload. I think that's costing you about $5,000 a month or something like that. It's like it's not expensive. So CDNs can be pretty cheap. Yeah, pretty useful. Yeah. That was it. Any other questions? No, sweet. It's good. That's easy.
Have you had any fun and games with X4 headers and IP restricting access or anything like that?
I've had a lot of fun and games. So, yeah, how long we got here? Yes. So we do a lot of these sites will, pretty much every site we've built will do some sort of geolocation based on IP. And that needs to come from either exported for or exported for gets annoying. What Cloudflare will send through the special header. Exported for is the standard header for if the original request came from here, so this IP address, it's a standard header if you're a cache or something in the middle or a proxy to set that so that as a proxy, I'm going to connect to you and you'll look at the request connection and it'll be my IP, not the original person's. Gets annoying with things like Cloudflare. You'll find issues because you'll suddenly put a new load balancer in place on your origin server and that'll also set an exported for header. And so you'll find you're looking at the wrong one. So it gets annoying. So I'd recommend ignoring that and use, if you've got a CDN that sets this explicit header, look at that. No one else is going to mess with it in between. Because you'll end up with some setups will have 4 or 5 exported for headers. And they don't all follow standards in how they append. So it gets a bit messy to look at. Other stuff we've had, so that code I was showing is using the cache control header for Cloudflare. This is a Cloudflare problem. Uses the cache control header, the S max age part of that to set that age. It's a standard recognized piece of any shared cache. And Cloudflare by default will pass that through. They'll respect it and then pass it through to downstream. And a lot of corporate proxies and shared caches in a lot of enterprises, they'll also respect that header and cache everything, but they've got no idea about the cookies and composite rules you have. So that happened to us once, and we got a call that the business is like, I'm on my desktop and I'm seeing the mobile page, and then 2 minutes later, on my mobile I'm seeing the desktop page, and yeah, it's because their cache was caching it and didn't respect those headers. So Cloudflare, since then, they don't pass that through because they've got a whole bunch of custom logic that means they shouldn't be passing through, and they don't do that now. That was also fun.
Any challenges with rate limiting, or you offload the CDN?
Rate limiting of
concurrent.
Yeah, okay. So are you talking about people basically trying to DOS you, or yeah, that's a massive reason to use a CDN. So a few of those clients, so sort of reference, they're all part of Wesfarmers and like Officeworks and Kmart, guys like that. And they, about a year and a half ago, pretty much the entire group had a DDoS attack against them all. And almost every one of the Wesfarmers sites went offline. And they couldn't respond to that traffic. DDoS is really hard to defend against. There's no way with your own infrastructure, if you're on-prem anywhere, you can't deal with that. There's no way to offload that traffic. Anywhere you put in a gateway to try and a firewall to detect and deal with that attack is going to get flooded with traffic. The only way of doing that is it's someone else's infrastructure, and that needs to be someone who can handle a lot. So Cloudflare, Akamai, all of those guys have web application firewalls. That's a massive part of what they do. So not only do you get offload in general, but someone doing a DDoS will figure out how to get through. So you go into Origin, they'll detect that it's a DDoS attack and block it. So you've seen the case of far-right political site in the States before the election, after the election, can't remember, in the States. Anyway, it's far-right site over there that Cloudflare took away service for. They wouldn't protect them anymore, and they have not been able to get their site back online since. The only reason they were existing on the internet was Cloudflare. They were sitting behind Cloudflare. They're the only provider who was able to absorb the attack volume that they were seeing. Yeah, really massive reason to get a CDN is the WAF, the Web Application Firewall. Plus, those guys see more attacks than anyone else. So they know how to detect them, they know how to deal with them, and they know how to handle the traffic volume. They're like the biggest pipe on the internet. So
they also have some people who hide behind their own those proxies. for that very purpose, for attacking the others. And,
Yeah.
You typically IP restrict access to origin to the back end of, say, Clark.
Yes.
Or not CDN.
Yep. That's another hard-earned lesson. Is yes, you do. So if you don't, and if you don't, and someone knows where your origin is, they can bypass all that protection and just hammer you. So yeah, so you need to restrict down access to only come out of Cloudflare, and they publish their IP ranges and things, so you can do exactly that. It's part of that setup. It gets difficult. People can still hammer you, and if they throw tons of traffic and it's just your firewall, then that's a problem. So don't tell anyone what your IP is at origin, and don't publish any domain name that might actually have it, because that's easily scanned. So we had a client who hadn't told anyone what the IP was. It was secret, and none of the IPs were published. None of the domains were published, except they screwed up and had one. There were one sitting like a root domain somewhere, and that people were scanning all of the domains that they registered to them and found one, and they were just trying them all out, and they found one that went to origin and took them offline.
That being said, a lot of CDNs, you're paying for the traffic, so it's also a potential open check that you're bankrupted by someone hammering the CDN and driving costs.
Look at your CDN contract.
Yeah.
Cloudflare aren't so bad. Most of them, if it's you pay them money for the WAF, so you're paying for that service, and you're doing that so that they shed that traffic for you. But Cloudflare don't. Their billing isn't really based on traffic volume.
And they don't charge you for bad traffic.
AKQA will send you a nice bill. AKQA is great. It's good, but really expensive, and service is not so amazing. I know plenty of people use it. We use it in more solutions, but yeah. Most stuff ends up being a service request back to their offshore team, 2 to 3 day turnaround. Yeah, but yeah, CDN for a WAF is that's another major reason to use it. Even if you bypass all traffic and don't cache anything, it's still worthwhile getting it just for that.
You had a play with Azure's offering and CloudFront and AWS, or you still see them as still on bigger release compared to
CloudFront, AWS CloudFront's pretty good. That does support a lot of the cookie-based, being able to use cookies to change your response. Azure doesn't. They don't have as many edge nodes going around. But actually, Azure actually is not all Microsoft's infrastructure. So their service is actually backed by Verizon and AKQA, I think. AKQA and Verizon. So when you use Azure CDN, you're actually paying for another provider who's backing it, but you don't get access to all the features they have. The simple offer. I haven't really used it. I assume it's fine. I know Fastly is another pretty good one around. They were shopping their wares around Victoria a while ago. They were meeting a lot of people, and they're pretty good. They're dev first, so friendly for devs. Cool.
Great.
Thanks, guys. Awesome. So I'd better stop this Google Hangouts thing before it records me on the way home.
The pockets are open.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm Mark from Wiggle Minute.
Ah, Mark, how you doing?
And Dan working
Yeah.
with you guys.
How you going?
We haven't actually met. Yeah, good. Good.